And welcome back to the booth here at Mythic Championship 6. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. That's Paul Cheon. And as Rich just said, this is where things get hot and heavy. This is where if you lose, you're not going to be eyeing that top 8 in any realistic scenario. Now, look, a good finish is a good finish, and you know you can still take home a nice cash and a good finish. But at this point in the tournament, these players are absolutely focused in on trying to get to that top 8 slot. And in our feature match area, everybody is sitting at 11 wins, 3 losses, which means they need to keep winning to keep that top 8 dream alive.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very important to pick up win number 12. That's kind of the magic number, especially with a 12-3 record. If you can pick up that draw in the last round, typically 37 points is what it takes to make it into the top 8. Now, of course, there are some wrinkles. There are some players sitting with a draw, and if you are X3 and you play against somebody who has 3 losses and a draw, you might not be able to get that draw. But, of course, the most important thing here is to win this match.
Well, this match is Sebastian Pozzo from Argentina playing Simic Food, again 11-3, versus Borja Muñoz from Spain on Jund Sacrifice, both of them, again, on an 11-3 record. But significantly different builds here, you know, or I shouldn't say builds, I should say approaches to the format from these two players.
Yeah, absolutely. Borja we've seen various 4-color versions and even different flavors of 3-color versions of the Sacrifice deck. And Borja actually just choosing to go straight Jund. We've seen players choose to play Oko and Splash Blue. And we've seen some Sacrifice decks that are simply just Sultai. So really interesting to see how this turns out for him. You know, the really kind of new, awesome, interesting card that I want to see in action is the 3 copies of Corvold Fey Curse King that he has in his deck. We got a little bit of an opportunity to see it in action yesterday, and let's see if we can see it here as well.
Brawl card? Is that what it is?
It is a Brawl card.
Well, turns out it's legal and standard, and some people are like, hey, I can make that thing work. Very powerful dragon, and maybe we'll get a chance to see it on the battlefield. Munoz does have one in hand here, so it's certainly not impossible. Right now, though, Cauldron Familiar all by its lonesome doesn't really do a whole lot. You do need the Witch's Oven to kind of make that thing work. In the meantime, on the other side of the battlefield, Sebastian Pozzo patiently moving his mana situation forward with Gilded Goose and Paradise Druid. There's land number 3 for mana number 5, but he just says go.
Yeah, he's got a Hydrate Krasis in hand, but probably wants to wait until he at least has access to 6 mana to make it into a 4/4 to draw that additional card.
Say if I'm in Munoz's seat, I'm feeling relief because that's Nissa turn. That's, you know, Oko plus Protect It, whatever. There's a lot of things that could have gone down there, and Munoz seems to have dodged that bullet temporarily. He's going to attack in with both creatures. The Midnight Reaper gets through. Cauldron Familiar was, I guess, just a bluff there, but Sebastian's like, sure, I'll throw the goose in front of it. And on end step. And by the way, no play there from Munoz either. On end step, a food gets made by the Gilded Goose.
So this seems like the opportunity here. Sebastian doesn't have a whole lot of other action in hand, so run out of Hydrate Krasis, turn it into a 4/4, draw some cards, gain some life, and now this is also the turn that Borja has to kind of unleash whatever threats that he might have been sandbagging to play around the Ether Gust, because he knows that Sebastian is on the Simic version, which is slightly more tempo-oriented, because instead of playing the removal spells in Noxious Grasp, you have Ether Gust, and also instead of some of the top-end threats that we've seen, he's playing 4 copies of Brazen Borrower. There you can see on the screen, Corvold, Fey Curse King. 5 mana 4/4 flyer. When you sacrifice a permanent, put a counter on Corvold and draw a card. If you can untap with Corvold in play, I mean, it is so difficult to lose. You're just going to get so far ahead on cards because there are so many different ways to draw cards.
On top of that, when Corvold enters a battlefield, you have to sacrifice another permanent, so you do get that kind of right away.
Right, and with that Midnight and Reaper in play, he's able to draw 2 cards off the Corvold.
Munoz brought a nice one and has really put himself in a good position late in the day. Just 2 rounds left, one after this one. And if he can just hang on with his Jund Sacrifice deck, we could see him in the top 8, but he is facing an experienced professional player in Sebastian Pozzo and somebody who's taking, you know, the best deck in the format.
Yeah, and Sebastian has no shortage of interaction here. He's going to cast Ether Gust here on Corvold, and that has 2 additional Ether Gusts here. If Borja just spends the next couple of turns just continuing to try to run out the Corvold, I mean, this Hydroid Krasis can actually end the game fairly quickly.
And look at that. Munoz is going to see through that plan and put Corvold on the bottom of the library. I think he's recognized I need to do multiple things a turn going forward here if I'm going to get back in this. I am behind the Hydroid Krasis by a fair bit here. So down to 12 he goes, and then Pozzo passes the turn back to Munoz. He draws his card for the turn, and it's another Mayhem Devil. He's a little flooded on those in hand. He's got at least 2 now, as well as an Angrath's Rampage. But the little mana creatures on the other side, yeah, they're worth getting with the Rampage. It's not like it's bad, but the real issue here is his Krasis.
Yeah, part of the reason why Angrath's Rampage is so powerful is just the fact that it can get Planeswalkers, right?
That's
the
right.
ability to target your opponent and have them sacrifice a Planeswalker means you're very likely going to get a no-go. And of course, that also works very well with a card like the Mayhem Devil because it triggers off of anybody sacrificing a permanent.
It looks like a trail of crumbs here from Munoz.
And Sebastian can choose to Ether Gust this. And if he does, he will prevent the enter the battlefield effect of creating a food. So if you did want to bounce it in some way, Ether Gust makes the most sense here instead of letting it resolve and then choosing to bounce it later.
Mm-hmm. So that's going to resolve on the Trail of Crumbs, and then Munoz is going to have a decision. On whether to put it at the top or the bottom of his library.
Yeah, this is tricky. Borja deciding how he's going to get ahead here. The Trail of Crumbs is a nice way to try to look through your deck, but he also needs to just find answers to that Hydroid Krasis.
Well, he's really stuck in the tank here on this one, and yeah. He does decide ultimately to keep it on top of his library, but it looked like a pretty close decision for him there. And he's going to go ahead and send in with the Midnight Reaper. If it were to die, he would end up getting the card back and could just cast the trail right away.
Yeah.
But as it stands, Pozzo's not going to play ball, so the Midnight Reaper gets in for 3, and he can follow it up with the Mayhem Devil here.
Yeah, so now that the Mayhem Devil is in play, Sebastian does have a couple of options. It looks like he has a 3rd Ether Gust here, so he can choose to Ether Gust this now, or, given that he has a Brazen Borrower, just choose to use that at the end of turn.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a tricky spot. The Brazen Borrower with just the 1 toughness dies to the Mayhem Devil pretty easily. So he's instead going to use Ether Gust number 3 on it, and Munoz must be looking at this like, geez. No wonder you have all those cards in your hand and you haven't been deploying them.
Right.
Yeah, he's going to play a land and pass the turn back over to Pozzo.
Yeah, and Pozzo has Borja on a 2-turn clock here. There's a Krasis and a Paradise Druid, and he has an additional bounce spell in the Brazen Borrower. It looks like he found another Brazen Borrower here. So he's got 2 Brazen Borrowers, 2 flying threats here that Borja needs to deal with on top of the Hydro Krasis that's already in play.
Yeah, the math is going to work out nicely here as well, Paul. You mentioned the 2-turn clock. That's because he can attack for 6 damage here, knocking Munoz down to 6, and then, you know, some combination of Brazen Borrowers in the air could also get the job done, thanks to the 3 power there. Here's Gilded Goose. Attack you for 6. Down to 6 goes Munoz. And he's going to pass the turn back. Also keep in mind that the 2 food tokens there from Pozzo can help buoy his life total in case Munoz did come up with some way to apply real pressure. So Sebastian Pozzo looking to be in a very good position here. Game 1 kind of has all his bases covered.
Yeah, and Munoz, I mean, doesn't really have a whole lot of time here, right? He can run out the Trail of Crumbs, but that's going to tax his mana. He's going to make a food, sack a food. You want to get the value from the Trail of Crumbs, so that's going to cost him 5 mana just to gain 3 life and maybe look for a card on top.
And here it comes again. There's Trail of Crumbs. When it enters the battlefield, you do get a food token, and Munoz picks that up here.
It's probably going to run out this Mayhem Devil and hope it resolves, and it likely will, given that we've now gone through 3 copies of Aether Gust.
That's right.
One thing Sebastian can do is bounce the food in response and force Borja to use the food to get the Cauldron Familiar in play.
Yep, so that's what he's going to do. He's going to sacrifice it, and it looks like...
Oh, and it counters the Brazen Borrower.
That's right. So I think Pozzo missed that interaction. I think he may have forgotten about the Cauldron Familiar in the yard. And I wouldn't call this a disaster, but it certainly isn't the way that Pozzo had it lined up when he used Petty Theft there.
But we've seen this happen multiple times. That is the upside of playing a deck that people aren't very familiar playing against.
Yep.
You know, we saw, I believe, Luis Salvato yesterday running an Edgewall Innkeeper into an active Cauldron Familiar activation. So this is something that we've seen before. However, I mean, given that Munoz is currently sitting at 7 life and has no way to sacrifice any permanents right now, all he simply needs to do is play out the other Brazen Borrower in hand, just cast it, and he can attack for 7 in the air, right?
Now, you actually, this is all in Spanish, kind of handy here. We have our Spanish-speaking judge as well as 2 players here, one from Spain, one from Argentina. And I don't speak Spanish, though, so I'm not sure what they're discussing, but I do believe that it's a question of, did you target something with Mayhem Devil? Because when that trigger goes on the stack after the Cauldron Familiar came back in, you have to target something right away. And if something happens after that, then it's usually considered a mistrigger because you didn't say, well, I'm going to target something specific.
I believe the bounce was in response to the Mayhem Devil. So the Mayhem Devil was on the stack.
Okay.
And then Sebastian tried to bounce the food token in response so that the Mayhem Devil wouldn't deal 1 damage to any of his creatures.
Okay.
And Borja then responded by sacrificing the food to put the Cauldron Familiar in play to fizzle the Brazen Borrower.
Okay.
But, of course, Sebastian has another Brazen Borrower, and that's a lethal attack.
Right, okay. And so they were just getting the timing worked out on that to make sure that there wasn't a trigger to the round. But as you just mentioned, Paul, it was all a moot point because the second Brazen Borrower there for Sebastian Pozzo was enough to put lethal on the battlefield, and that is game number 1 going to him. So, ooh, baby.
And, you know,
getting close.
This is one of those instances, right, where choosing to play Simic over Sultai really worked out in Pozzo's favor because he was able to Aether Gust Mayhem Devil,
Oh,
right?
you're right.
Noxious Grasp, unable to deal with the Mayhem Devil in any way, shape, or form. So by being able to use the Aether Gust and prevent that from actually happening, that just gave him an additional interaction point to kind of prevent the sacrifice deck from doing its thing.
That's right, and you do see those smaller interactions when you're planning for a world where everybody's main decking Noxious Grasp, and you try to sidestep that by at least a little bit, and then you run into the person who is kind of prepared for that. You can see that that actually pans out. Now, that particular draw was kind of interesting because it was 3 copies of Aether Gust. You know, this wasn't just like I got random out. It was like that was a big part of how this game ended up playing out.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I mean, there are a lot of reasons that you want to be playing the Simic deck, right? Not only that, you get to curve out beautifully, you don't take as much damage from your lands, and Aether Gust also very relevant in a lot of other matches. Coming into this tournament, a lot of people also chose to play decks like Temur Reclamation. Noxious Grasp, again, not doing anything there, whereas Aether Gust does.
Yeah, that's right. All right, well, we're going to be taking a short break here, but when we come back from that, we'll be right back down into the feature match area with all the live action here in our penultimate round for Mythic Championship 6. Don't go anywhere.
I'm here on the floor of Mythic Championship 6 with a man who's having a pretty good weekend already, even though not a single card has been played because Reed Duke is becoming a member of the Hall of Fame this very evening. But there's going to be plenty of talk about that for the rest of the weekend, I'm sure, anyway. I want to talk to you about this season because you've been having quite the season just this last year.
Yeah, it's been good. I mean, I think everyone's pretty excited for the future of Magic. Getting to be part of the inaugural Magic Pro League is awesome in its own right. And, you know, I've been fortunate enough to float part of the way to the top among that really talented crowd. So, yeah, definitely can't complain.
Now, Worlds is coming up, and you're in prime position to be able to lock up a spot for Worlds, potentially at this event. How important is that in the sort of the overall scheme of your planning for the event? Are you shooting for the stars on this one to lock it up, or are you just like, let's be solid and make sure we continue with the good results?
Well, it's almost the situation where the pressure's the greatest, right? Because a lot of times you show up at the Magic tournament and there's 400 or 500 players, and you're going, well, maybe it'll be my weekend and I can spike something great. But when you actually have your position in the standing that you're trying to protect, it's almost like, don't blow it. So, it looks as though to make the World Championships, I'm going to need a good finish in either Mythic Championship 6 or 7. So it would really, really be great in terms of my standing and my season if I could have a good finish this weekend.
Now, in terms of testing, obviously, we've got a standard format that, to greater or less extent, has been around for a little while now. Mm-hmm. How has the balance of your testing been between that and Throne of Eldraine Limited?
Good question. We also had Mythic Championship 5, which came just a couple of weeks before this. And while there was a major banning between then and now, I played the Simic Gilded Goose Oko deck at that event. So that's sort of the framework of this standard format. So I feel like I have a pretty good base. Practiced a lot from home. And then by the time I showed up to practice with my teammates, it was almost time to, let's get some house drafts, some booster drafts against other tough players and iron that out.
Just about the toughest drafts that you'll find pretty much anywhere, Mythic Championship included, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I was playing some drafts from home on Arena and Magic Online, and I was like, man, I nailed it. I'm killing it. I'm winning every time. And then I showed up to the testing house, and I was like a below 50-50 player among that crowd. So it goes to show you that, there's some work to do, and the Pro Tour is never going to be easy.
Well, we're going to get a chance to find out exactly how easy or hard it is for Reed Duke this weekend soon enough. Best of luck to you here. Mythic Championship 6, Reed Duke.
And welcome back to the feature match area here for Mythic Championship 6. We're in Richmond. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe with Paul Cheon. And we're right down the stretch here. Round number 15 is underway. This is where our top 8 is really starting to come into focus, at least for some players. And in our feature match area, we've got, well, all 8 of them are sitting with an 11-3 record, which with the size of the field means a loss is, well, you're certainly not guaranteed, and probably looking out of the top 8 contention with a win to put you right in the mix the next round to maybe get a draw, maybe fight it out and see if you can't make it in yourself. We've got kind of an interesting matchup here. We have Max Mick, a relative newcomer to the high-level Magic scene.
That's Eli Cassis, I believe, against Javier Dominguez.
You are right.
Yes.
Good eye, Paul.
I was like, Max Mick is playing Simic.
Yeah, so there's another good thing there. Yeah, right. You're right. So that's the champ there on the right. That's Javier Dominguez. And Eli Cassis on the left-hand side. We've been watching Eli play quite a bit over the course of the weekend.
And what a run Javier's been having.
I have been watching him play a lot over the past year or two.
If he somehow wins this event, I mean, come on. World champion, winner of Mythic Championship 5, and also in the mix for top 8 for Mythic Championship 6.
Well, that overhead shot was Max Mick and Andrew Cuneo, so maybe we'll get a chance to check on them. But our main table's ready to go. So we'll get back into it here and see perhaps if Munoz can fade a few of the sideboard style cards that he could not here in game number 1, or if it's going to be Sebastian Pozzo putting up yet another great finish. Sebastian, another up-and-comer who has really made a good name for himself.
Yeah, was the constructed master.
That's right.
Not too long ago.
Okay, here's a big one. Witch's Oven, we didn't get a chance to see that much before. And this can absolutely turbo out some of the synergies that Munoz's list has.
But Sebastian with the classic 1-2 punch here. Turn 1 Gilded Goose, turn 2 Oko. We've seen a lot of this, and extremely powerful start.
That's right. Now let's see if Munoz perhaps has something out of the sideboard that he could use to help. Nope.
Yep, Munoz actually with not as much interaction. Oh no, he does. He's got 4 copies. They're all in the main. He's got the 4 copies of Noxious Grasp,
Right.
along with 2 copies of Angrass Rampage. So he has 6, 2 copies of Assassin's Trophy, although you're not really happy about using that against Oko, especially on turn 2.
Yeah, he has 3 duress that he can use in the board, but of course it's a little late for that. Though there is good news here. There's an Angrass Rampage right now, and he's going to name Planeswalker, so it's going to go away. And I got to say, that exchange, not bad at all. Sure, there's a food left behind, and that does matter, make no mistake. But he needed to use a food to get it onto the battlefield. It's about as good as you're going to get.
Meanwhile, Sebastian with a completely loaded hand here. He has a backup Oko here if he wants, that he's likely going to run out here because he probably wants to play out a Wicked Wolf with a food in play to protect it and also just a creature to kill. So Oko makes a lot of sense here. Perhaps just making an additional food here because it might be pretty difficult for Munoz to deal with Wicked Wolf. We saw how much trouble Eli Cassis had. Traditional just black removal just doesn't answer Wicked Wolf if you have enough food in play.
So there's Oko again. Land number 4 for Munoz. What can he do to fight back here? It looks like he may have a Vraska Golgari Queen at the ready. He does.
All right, so he has back-to-back answers for the Oko. Gonna be getting that Oko off the battlefield, and if Sebastian doesn't have a Nissa or Oko number 3, that Vraska likely will stay in play for a turn.
Again, Munoz doing a good job here. He has managed to answer both copies of Oko the turn after they hit the battlefield. And, you know, if you can keep doing that, he might be able to hang in this game.
And at this point, given that Vraska is in play, I think he probably just wants to run out a Wicked Wolf here. With no targets, he has a backup Wicked Wolf and a Voracious Hydra too. And very, very difficult for Munoz to kill an active Wicked Wolf. He would need 2 removal spells. First, kill the Gilded Goose, and then maybe have some kind of sacrifice effect to get the Wicked Wolf off the battlefield.
Yeah, Angrass Rampage is a way that you can do that, but it's going to start slipping away here because we see Voracious Hydra hit the battlefield for Pozzo. It's a 4/5. Not bad.
The Witch's Oven not doing a whole lot right now. The Voracious Hydra is nice in the fact that it does have trample, and Sebastian still has a way to protect the Hydra from a spot removal spell because he does have that Veil of Summer in hand. In fact, both players with the Veil of Summer in hand.
Midnight Reaper.
The question is he going to choose to sacrifice a permanent?
No,
Nope.
he's just going to plus and pass. He wants to keep the Witch's Oven and all of his lands, and certainly the Midnight Reaper intact. Wow, another Voracious Hydra to complement the 2 copies of Wicked Wolf in hand, plus Veil of Summer for Pozzo. Boy, that's going to be a tough, tough hand to beat, especially considering that he's already ahead.
Yeah, and the nice part about Wicked Wolf as a removal source, instead of, you know, cards like Noxious Grasp and even Brazen Borrower, is the fact that it's green, meaning that even if your opponent has Veil of Summer, it can fight through that. Veil of Summer only gives your creatures hexproof from blue and black spells.
Well, Wicked Wolf comes down, knocks out the Midnight Reaper, clears the way for the Voracious Hydra, and all of a sudden Munoz is back to almost square one here. He loses his Vraska. He's got a food and a Witch's Oven.
Yeah, I mean, this is just also just the power of the food deck, right? Sure, you dealt with some of the Planeswalkers, but look, the Oko still created food, and Sebastian still has lots of useful ways to use that food. He's got that Wicked Wolf, and he's still putting a lot of pressure here.
All right, here's Corvold, though. Corvold hits the battlefield, now a 5/5 with flying, also Sacrificed, it looks like the food, but not for life, just to sacrifice to Corvold and to get that card as well. So this is kind of a in Corvold we trust
Right.
scenario, because he's kind of hanging on to it. But I tell you, if Corvold can stick around, it might actually be good enough.
Yeah, and he's tapped out now. So if Sebastian did have a bounce spell, it would have been huge here.
Yep.
Or perhaps Oko number 3. So he had a lot of different opportunities, a lot of different ways to potentially interact, but couldn't find one.
Now, you mentioned before, though, that if Munoz gets to untap with Corvold, that opens up the floodgates potentially.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's see what he's got to offer here. I know that he's got a Mayhem Devil in his hand, also a Massacre Girl, a Veil of Summer, a Stomping Ground.
Yeah, so if he plays out a Massacre Girl, he will be able to get a mini chain going, but it would only actually kill 2 creatures. He would be able to get the Paradise Trooper, which would then trigger the Massacre Girl again and get the Gilded Goose off the table. But that Wicked Wolf is a 4/4, the Voracious Hydra is a 5/5, and Sebastian can even pump the Wicked Wolf into potentially a 6/6 because he has a Gilded Goose activation available.
But he's decided it's worth it, so there's Massacre Girl. Could he further the chain by using Witch's Oven in any way? No, it's still 4 toughness, 5 toughness, 1 toughness, 2 toughness, and then his own creature.
And it looks like Sebastian is just making a food here in response, and we're going to see some triggers here.
Yeah, you said only 2 creatures, but that's still 2 creatures, and none of them were on Munoz's side, so he can live with it, I guess. So it looks like he's going to activate Corvold here, sacrificing a forest.
And he's going to get in for, so it's everything's -3/-3, so he's probably going to get in for 3 damage here.
Yep.
And Munoz now with a blocker, but the sizing for the Massacre Girl is just not exactly where you want it to be. It's a 4/4, but it's facing up against a 4/5 Voracious Hydra and a 4/4 Wicked Wolf, which could potentially be a 6/6. So, you know, Munoz still in trouble. He's sitting at 11, and Pozzo very close to just kind of finishing off the game with these 2 creatures that he's in play.
I feel like he's in a good position given the contents of his hand as well, Paul. He is looking very nice here with another Voracious Hydra, another Wicked Wolf, and then maybe to fend off a potential removal spell, the Veil of Summer as well. He's just overpowering Munoz here. Munoz has some powerful stuff going on his side, but it's just not on the same league, at least currently. So he's going to block the Wicked Wolf and then sacrifice to make a food. And then he'll get a card off of Corvold as well.
Oh, and this means that Sebastian actually doesn't even need to sacrifice a food. And because Massacre Girl had 4 power, you get 2 food off the Witch's Oven.
That's right.
Corvold continues to grow. So that is a 7/7 Corvold, so Wicked Wolf won't be able to deal with it.
Card's really powerful.
Yeah, the thing Sebastian just needs to be careful of is that Corvold somehow just going to kill me in one shot? Is he just going to attack and just get me? And Sebastian just trying to set up here for a big lethal attack next turn. That's 12 power, potentially 14 with the 2 food, and he's got a mobilized district that he could animate as well.
2 food tokens for Munoz means that he can buffer his life total up to 13, but at a steep cost of most of his mana for the turn. He finds a Gilded Goose, and he also had drawn another Witch's Oven as well.
And Sebastian Pozzo took 2 damage there and let the Breeding Pool untap. So Borja has to be mindful of that. Has to be mindful that Sebastian probably has a Veil of Summer. So while Borja does have Noxious Grasp in hand, he has to think it's pretty unlikely for it to actually be good here. Still, it's got to be scary if you're on Pozzo's side and your opponent's just doing math with their fingers on the table. Like, okay, they got a Corvold in play. We know this thing does a lot of stuff.
We're going to see a Mayhem Devil here.
Looks like it.
Okay, and he does have a Witch's Oven with another one in hand. There's definitely things that can happen here.
Yeah, he doesn't have a Cauldron Familiar in the graveyard, so he can't just sack all the food at will to get a bunch of triggers, which would be very nice with the Corvold. He can sacrifice a food, which would gain him some life, deal 1 damage to something, but of course that's not going to be enough. Oh, this is an okay. So this is actually really interesting. Sebastian, in an effort to maybe not get burned out by the Mayhem Devil, might choose to is casting Veil of Summer here in response to Mayhem Devil, so he won't take a point of damage every time Munoz sacrifices a permanent. But now, in response, Munoz has the option of potentially running out a Noxious Grasp here to kill one of those Voracious Hydras. Okay, but it looks like Veil just resolved.
Well, Borja can do that still on Sebastian's turn, but
Also, keep in mind, Borja doesn't need to attack here with the Corvold. The Corvold will just be able to devour one of the creatures in play.
that's true. And assuming that Munoz stays alive, that could be quite good, or at least maybe dissuade Pozzo from attacking. Here's a Gilded Goose creating a 3rd food token. And he can still play another Witch's Oven as well. Whoa, he's attacking? Okay.
Now he has to
Sacrifice
deal
some
1
food
damage
Corvold.
to one of his own creatures, I guess.
Yeah.
He's drawing a card.
He found another Massacre Girl.
So this is a big attack. Now the question is, does Sebastian just have a lethal attack on the crackback here?
Yeah, the mana situation looks like it may have caught up to Munoz here.
So, I mean, Sebastian is not dead. And Munoz doesn't have a land drop to sack a food to gain life, right?
No.
Wow, okay, so he's sacrificing a goose here to draw a card.
I wonder if there's something specific that he could find.
Does he want an untapped land just to be able to draw a card off the food?
Yeah, maybe. Or the life. I think he found it too. He does get in for 1 additional damage thanks to that play. Yeah, he found a swamp. Putting him at effectively 10 life.
Now, does he save more damage if he just uses Noxious Grasp here?
Yeah, he does.
But, of course, if Pozzo has another Veil of Summer, that leaves him very exposed.
Yeah, potentially dead.
And yeah, Sebastian has another Wicked Wolf, so he can use the Wicked Wolf to try to eat the Mayhem Devil, and he has Veil of Summer here for a potential Noxious Grasp.
A second Veil of Summer here for Pozzo.
Huge.
Probably is going to lock this thing up.
Yeah, because, again, Sebastian has an attack here for 12, right?
Yep.
So he has an attack for 12. Even if Munoz chooses to gain the life, instead of cast Noxious Grasp, he's going to go up to 10, and that's still just a lethal attack. Yeah, I thought maybe he was going to keep that Corvold back just as a blocker.
Just looks like there's no way out here for Munoz. And there's the Veil of Summer, and he's going to extend the hand. Sebastian Pozzo advances to 12-3 with a hard-fought victory there over Munoz, but it is Pozzo who picks up the win here. Now, this is a pretty big Mythic Championship, players-wise, number of players-wise, so you're going to need a pretty good record to get into the top 8, and that is not a guarantee for Pozzo at this point. He's going to have to take a look at the standings after this round is over and kind of see where he'll fit in.
But one step closer.
One very, very big step
Oh, yeah.
closer. You can even see the relief on his face when he won that one. Let's pop over to the match that we were going to look at before, Andrew Cuneo versus Max Mick.
That is a lot of, I mean, it's pretty far away, but that looks like 3 Edgewall Innkeepers
Wow,
on
and that
Andrew
looks like,
Cunio's side.
it looks like a lot of tokens with a lot of counters on
Wow.
them from Andrew Cunio.
And you can
Cunio's
just-
on Celestia.
Yeah. You can kind of tell by the body language. Max not happy here, and Cunio just drew. I mean, you see 3 Edgewall Innkeepers in play. Clearly, he just drew way too many cards here.
Yep, that's exactly right. Andrew Cunio, the old guard, potentially dispatching of the new guard, but keep your eye on Max Mick. He won a GP recently. I've known him for a few years now, and that guy can play.
Yeah.
I would not be at all surprised to see him back in the feature match area, perhaps with some top 8s, maybe even a win in his career. I mean, seriously, he's really good. His dad was actually one of the original play testers for Magic the Gathering, like with the good doctor. I mean,
A nice teacher.
yeah, so not a bad teacher, and also just a game, a smart, kind of raised in that environment. And Max shows it. He's been good for a few years now, and he's a young guy as it stands as well.
And props to Andrew Cunio. I mean, coming in, the rest of his team basically on the food deck, more or less. And he made a pretty deep run in MPL Weekly with the Celestia Adventure deck, and just decided to run it back. Even in a field full of Noxious Grasps, he goes, you know what? That doesn't matter. I have lots of ways to. You have, of course, the Edgewall Innkeeper, lots of ways to protect the Edgewall Innkeeper. He is playing the full 4 copies of Shepherd of the Flock, and also just the overall strategy of going wide and putting maximum pressure on the opponent, and it's been paying off for him.
Yeah, it's funny, too, because I had a quick chat with him yesterday, and I said, well, what made you choose to bring Celestia? There had to be some appeal to it, especially given what you said about the Noxious Grasp everywhere. And he was like, I don't find the Oko Mirror very fun. And I kind of laughed, and I was like, what do you mean? Like, he's a professional player.
Right.
It's like, usually that isn't the factor. And I'm like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah. He goes, look, this is my job. He's like, but I could do a lot of different jobs. I do this one because it's fun for me. Now, obviously, there's a balance there for him. It's not just about fun, but for him, he's going to bring something to the table here that actually he enjoys doing. It is important to him, and he's found victory with it.
Yeah, I mean,
well.
again, at the end of the day, Magic the Gathering is a game, right? A lot of different things that you could be doing, and perhaps he was maybe sacrificing a little bit of an edge, but he's playing the deck that he really enjoys to play. There's a lot you can say about that.
All right, well, I guess we've got Time Walk Magic here for you and I, Paul. So
All right.
we'll pop into this here. Paulo Vitor Domita Rosa. Does he ever lose? He's 11-3 again. It's like we look at our calendar, Paul, and it's like, has it been a year? Is it time for him to top 8 again? He just seems to top 8 every single year. He's playing against Gregors Kowalski here in an MPL fight between the two players. And it looks like as we come in here, Gregors is the one up a game over Paulo.
Yeah, Paulo, it's one of those moments where, like, well, Paulo's due for a top 8 once a year, and yeah, this might be the one. Time and time again, in situations exactly like this, Paulo finds ways to come up with the victory.
And it looks like Sorceress Spyglass is going to come in, and Gregors is double checking to see, look, the Gilded Goose should be able to make mana, but it's a little bit of a weird way to do it because it says unless it's a mana ability. So I think he's trying to figure out, well, can you still use your goose? Can it produce food? Like, what's the deal here?
Yeah. So it will definitely shut off the ability to make food because, of course, that's an activated ability. I believe the question was, can you actually tap it for mana to sack for food?
And the answer is, yep. Still a mana ability.
Did he name the Gilded Goose?
I don't know.
I guess we'll find out soon enough. One card that's actually seems quite good here is Deafening Clarion, right? When you play against this food deck, it's really good at just generating an army of 3/3s. You have, of course, Oko, Thief of Crowns, but on top of that, you have Nissa, who shakes the world. And the Deafening Clarion just does a really good job of just sweeping up basically most of the threats in this deck.
And we see the Sorcerer Spyglass had named Oko, but gets returned to hand with Petty Theft there.
But Paul with not a whole lot of cards left in his hand here.
Kowalski perhaps a little bit crimped on mana, and Paulo just passes the turn back. Is he just trying to get him with a mystical dispute here or something?
Possibly.
Because Kowalski doesn't really have any other play but to just run out the Sorcerer's Spyglass again anyway. And it's funny, he actually did have the mystical dispute, just didn't cast it. I guess he's going to name the Brontodon here, because otherwise he'll just lose this. Well, actually, I don't know now. We'll find out.
Yeah.
You could see the line on just naming Brontodon, because otherwise you lose the Spyglass anyway. But also, if your Spyglass trades for a Brontodon, maybe you're fine with that too.
Yeah, I mean, it really, of course, depends on the complexion of Kowalski's hand, right? If Kowalski has a Fires of Invention or something in his hand, he might just want to name the Brontodon so that he can just reliably cast additional spells off the Fires of Invention.
Hopefully we'll get a chance to kind of find that out moving forward here. There's Once Upon a Time for Paulo. Boy, he really needs to find some action, though. I mean, he's got something going on here with the Brazen Borrower chipping in. But where are the Planeswalkers, you know?
And Paulo just continuing to keep up the Mystical Dispute, knowing that the quickest way he's going to lose here, yeah, and he did name the Brontodon.
That makes me think he does have a Fires of Invention.
Right. But, of course, given that he knows about the Mystical Dispute, can't really run it out just yet.
That's right. So instead, he's going to go for Prison Realm and say, you want to counter this one?
Yeah, Paulo has to decide, like, how is he going to be racing? What is his approach here? Does he want to counter the Prison Realm? Kowalski knows about it, so he's going to do his best to play around it. So is it better to just use the Mystical Dispute and just try to apply maximum pressure before Kowalski inevitably draws enough lands to stabilize here?
Paulo really thinking through this spot. And he has decided, yeah, I do need to counter that. I want to keep the pressure up with the Brazen Borrower. There is land number 4, though, for Kowalski before passing the turn back. And again, Paulo just really hoping to find a Planeswalker and this just some way to really pull ahead in this game now. And he's found an Oko.
Huh. So this puts Kowalski on a 2-turn clock, potentially. If Paulo turns the food into a 3/3 and attacks with everything, that's an attack for 8. Kowalski's currently sitting at 15, so that could be an option. But it looks like the Yoko's going up to 6. If he goes up to 6, he can make a food. Okay, so yeah, he sees it here. He's going to attack for 6 and just run out of Brontodon.
Pass the turn back to Kowalski, and all the pressure's on him. Because now Paulo is well and truly ahead. He added 6 power to the board there. And all these cards may just end up getting stuck in hand here for Kowalski. Yeah,
wow.
He did not have a way out. And Paulo Vitor Rosa says, I'm just going to find the win here. And we're going to jump right to game number 3 between these two players. Effectively an elimination match for top 8, certainly in their minds. And, wow, I mean, these are, again, both MPLers going at it, so a lot on the line for them, no doubt about it.
Was that last card Gilded Goose? If he has a forest, that would be very, very nice. Oh, it was a Questing Beast. Nice thing about the Questing Beast, especially in this matchup, you have to know that one of Kowalski's primary source of interaction is, of course, Deafening Clarion. So 4 toughness, very, very important here.
Land. This one's a temple as well. And just as you say that, Paul, you can see the Deafening Clarion on the top of Kowalski's hand there.
Oh, no mana creatures here for Paulo, but 3 Brazen Borrowers, so
he's going to be looking to bounce basically anything.
yeah, and the Spyglass, you better believe it's going to get bounced here. Yeah, it's not going to matter too much what Kowalski names.
No, the interesting part about it is it's more a question of if Paulo can glean any information from what Kowalski ends up naming here.
Yeah, I imagine Kowalski, I mean, the only thing you can name that has any impact whatsoever would be, of course, naming Oko Thief of Crowns here. So he's
So you
probably
just
going to
do that.
So you just name Oko, and then Paulo's going to bounce it, and then probably run out an Oko. Or maybe not. Maybe he just runs out the Brazen Borrower as just a way to just put some pressure on Kowalski. Also leaving up counter magic, right? Kowalski into open mana might not want to just run out something like a Fires of Invention, although he does have maximum information because he did see Paulo's hand with that Sorcerer's Spyglass.
Yeah, just one unknown card, right?
Right.
Paulo's just going to pass. Meaning, I don't want to play Oko, but I'm probably going to play Brazen Borrower is kind of the takeaway here for Kowalski.
Yeah, if I was Kowalski and I did have the Fires, I would just run it out here, right? You've seen his hand already. Sure, he can bounce it, but if you do have a follow-up play to the Fires of Invention, you can just go Fires, double spell, and at some point you do have to fight through all of the Brazen Borrowers that Paulo has. He does have a Teferi. That's something that he could consider, but keep in mind that Paulo did reveal Questing Beast. So if you do play the Teferi, even if you tick it up, Paulo can just respond by casting Brazen Borrower, then go land Questing Beast and get that Teferi off the battlefield. But now Kowalski probably, because he knows that, is just going to bounce the Brazen Borrower to draw a card.
Yeah, but Paulo didn't have a choice there. He
Right.
had to cast it in response to Teferi if that was his game plan. And by casting Teferi, it kind of forces Paulo to do that. So this didn't work out horribly for Kowalski, though you do kind of get the vibe that he's scratching and fighting given all the tools that Paulo Vitor da Rosa has in hand and the fact that the Questing Beast just hit Kowalski for 4 and took out Teferi in one fell swoop.
Yeah, but this did buy Kowalski some time. And you know, we're at the point now where if he just plays an untapped land here, he doesn't need Fires. He can just start hard casting Cavaliers and get value that way.
Yeah, you do what you got to do.
Probably wants an island here, as he has 3 red sources already for Cavalier of Flame. So you want the 3rd island to hardcast Cavalier of Gales.
It's funny, he just noticed that, didn't he?
Yeah.
So he does get an island.
And there is a Cavalier of Flame. So now that also has the enter the battlefield ability of discarding X cards and drawing X cards.
Of course, that's a great way to find your next Cavalier. Looks like that Spyglass plus a land. So discard 2, draw 2. Go ahead. Big turn here for Paulo. Of course, one key interaction is just with Oko turning a Cavalier into a 3/3 elk and shutting off all of its abilities.
Yeah, he can choose to just play Oko, turn Cavalier into a 3/3, and then just attack with Questing Beast. And if he does have land number 5, he can also just keep up the bounce effect, Petty Theft. But it looks like he doesn't have land number 5, so... Oh, no, he does. He does. Okay.
He does, and he's just going to leave up Brazen Borrower as he passes a turn back.
Yeah, playing the tempo game here. Kowalski already had 12 life.
Yeah, it does add up quickly. The Questing Beast got in there a couple of times. Now the Borrower's threatening him. There's a land for Kowalski. This is a Game 3 decider, too.
One thing I'll note is that, you know, a lot of the matches here, at least we've seen in the main feature area, have... All these players have been having success with just the blue-green version here with the tempo, and Brazen Borrower has been extremely impressive.
And there's Cavalier of Flame. Trigger goes on.
So now Kowalski needs to dig here, but Paulo Vitor here can just go end of turn, cast Brazen Borrower on my turn, once again bounce Cavalier of Flame, attack you for 7. That's going to put Kowalski down to 5 life.
Wow, all these Brazen Borrowers. He's just going to cast this one.
Paulo very familiar with playing with a bunch of flash fairies. He had a lot of success back in the day when blue-black fairies was one of the most dominant decks in the format.
Look at that, though. Mystical Dispute
Okay.
with that last blue mana from Gregor's Kowalski. Says, no thank you. And Paulo's going to have to settle for the Questing Beast this turn.
I wonder if he's just going to go for the same play that he did before. Bounce Cavalier, attack you for 4.
It does seem like a pattern that's hard to get away from if you're Gregor's Kowalski here. There it is. Send it back to your hand. Jam for 4 with the Questing Beast and pass the turn back. And he's got to be getting sick of having cast this Cavalier Flame every turn and never really being able to do anything with it.
So Kowalski's not dead just yet, right? Because even with the Brazen Borrower, that would be 7 damage that comes in. So if Paulo does use the last Brazen Borrower in hand, that won't be enough. And Kowalski mixing it up this turn and running out a Teferi here instead.
And Paulo is going to do the same thing we saw in the last game. He's going to respond with the Brazen Borrower as he must if that's his plan. And now Teferi can return the Questing Beast.
Yep.
It is rough, though. You know, returning a haste creature, not really great, especially when it's one that's going to knock your life total down to 1 effectively and kill your Teferi.
The only upside is that you know that he's pretty likely to play it, and Paulo did miss a land drop. So at the very least, you know that Paulo is not going to have, or there's less of a likelihood that Paulo has a follow-up play after the Questing Beast. And Kowalski running out the Scryland here first before bouncing the Questing Beast most likely here.
He is looking at his options. He only has 2 choices. He could return Brazen Borrower, but that kind of locks him in this awkward loop. Though he is in you do what you got to do mode here, and we'll see. Down to 8 is Gregor's Kowalski against the all-timer, Paulo Vitor Dama de Rosa.
I mean, bouncing the Questing Beast seems like the only real option here, unless he has... No, even if he has a Present Realm, you just don't want to be bouncing the Brazen Borrower.
He did.
Oh,
he bounced
okay.
the Brazen Borrower. Draws his card. And it looks like he's going to play nothing.
Is he going to hold Sorcerer's Spyglass just to draw more cards with the Cavalier? No.
No, he's going to go ahead and play it. And he looks down at a pretty nice one here. Oko Thrashing Brontodon Once Upon a Time. A pair of Brazen Borrowers and a Wicked Wolf. That hand is stacked for Paulo Vitor Dama de Rosa. You got to feel like he's going to be able to find a way to get these last, well, effectively 4 points of damage in with that hand.
By the way, I talked about this in the previous match, but again, having access to these bounce spells in Ether Gust and even the Brazen Borrower making a huge difference in this matchup, right? Noxious Grasp wouldn't have done anything.
Huge difference. So down to 4 goes Kowalski. Teferi goes running away, no more loyalty left. And Paulo, what is he going to do here?
At this point, Paulo just thinking of all the possible options here for Kowalski, but leaving a lot of mana up. He has a lot of different options available here. He's got the Brazen Borrower. He's got Once Upon a Time.
Boy, this does remind me of when Paulo was piloting the Fairies deck way back in the day. So many options for him. And, you know, it's often said that the better the player, the more options they get, the better it is. I mean, they're just going to make more correct choices than an average player. And if you give them more choices, they're going to make more correct choices. And that just seems to be the case here for Paulo, where there's so many different ways that he could have maneuvered through this game.
And Prison Realm is also just not the best card in this matchup because at some point, Paulo can just set up a turn where he just bounces at end of turn with the Brazen Borrower, or even just kill that enchantment with that Thrashing Brontodon.
Yeah, and you know how standard is these days, too. It's all Planeswalkers and enter the battlefield creatures and such. So it's not like they just get their thing back. They're usually getting something else in addition.
Looks like Paulo wants to respond to the enter the battlefield effect on Cavalier of Flame, just so that Kowalski can't draw some kind of counterspell to counter the Brazen Borrower here. Although now, if Kowalski desperately needs to find an answer, he could just pitch his entire hand and draw 4 cards.
Is there any way out for him?
It looks like Paulo's going to get this one. I mean, Kowalski, if he does go land Prison Realm, Paulo has the Brazen Borrower to bounce that. Like, Deafening Clarion doesn't get it done. And remember, Kowalski does not have access to a lot of mana here because he spent all of it casting the Cavalier of Flame.
Just does 1 card, and he found it to Teferi.
Teferi won't get it done.
He's got Fabled Passage for land number 3.
Yeah,
Yeah, Teferi's definitely not enough here.
Yeah, if he uses Teferi to bounce a Questing Beast, Paulo simply just replays it.
And kills him. So things looking good for Paulo Vitor Rosa. He's got his opponent, Gregors Kowalski, down to 4 life. He has threats in hand that he can cast on Gregor's turn. He has a lethal threat on the battlefield with nothing opposing it currently.
Paulo's played 3 spells this game.
The same Brazen Borrower 3 times?
He's just played Brazen Borrower and Questing Beast, and that's all it took. Meanwhile, Kowalski desperately digging through his deck for enough answers here.
And I believe he's going to fall short here. Yeah, we have it right here, right? We know that there's a Thrashing Brontodon. All he has to do is blow up the Prison Realm, and that gives him a hasty flyer, or a hasty creature that can just kill him. And even then, it's just another petty theft, and he's going to steal the game here. So that is Paulo Vitor Rosa in contention for top 8 here with only 3 losses going into the last round. A win for sure would put him in, and he may even be able to consult the standings board and see what's up.
I mean, we even talked about this in the limited portion. We're like, oh, wait, hey, that's Paulo's name, right? He's a closer. And guess what he did? He was down a game, and then didn't matter. He came back. It looked like he mulliganed in the second game too, but still just put enough pressure in Kowalski. I mean, the deck sometimes a little inconsistent, and it didn't really do a whole lot for him that last game.
Yeah, you'd think you get used to seeing Paulo at the top tables, and I kind of have actually. So, all right, so we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll be at the news desk where Maria Rich and the crew will be breaking down everything that's going on the tournament floor, and then we'll be gearing up for the last round of the day here. Don't go anywhere.